The air in the sterile conference room was thick with attention so palpable it hummed like an overloaded circuit. Every eye, every camera lens, every breath seemed to converge on the woman seated at the witness stand, her usually gaze now flickering, betraying a flicker of the immense pressure pressing down upon her. This was not a backroom deal, nor a quiet negotiation. This was the precipice of a global reckoning, a moment where the veil was about to be torn from the grandest, most audacious deception of the modern age. Billions of dollars, the reputations of Silicon Valley's most powerful titans, and the very trust in technological innovation hung in the balance, suspended over an abyss of meticulously crafted lies. The silence stretched, an eternity pregnant with unspoken accusations, until the prosecutor's voice, sharp as a scalpel, cut through it, delivering the question that had haunted boardrooms and newsrooms alike for years. Ms. Holmes, did you knowingly mislead investors regarding the capabilities of Theranos' technology? Her response, delivered with a practiced calm that barely masked the tremor in her voice, would echo through the halls of justice and the annals of corporate infamy. I never committed fraud. This was about belief, about a mission to change the world, a chilling declaration, defiant to the last, even as the walls of her fabricated empire crumbled around her. But what happened next, what unfolded in the brutal light of public scrutiny, was not just the unmasking of a charlatan. It was a seismic event, a catastrophic implosion that sent shockwaves through the very foundations of trust, capital, and the intoxicating allure of Silicon Valley's seemingly limitless ambition. It changed everything we thought we knew about innovation, about integrity, and about the dangerous allure of a charismatic vision unmoored from reality. The truth, once unleashed, proved to be far more powerful and far more devastating than any lie. Before we dive into this incredible confrontation, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any of these explosive political moments. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Introducing the central figures in this epic saga of ambition, innovation, and ultimately, deception. We find two vastly different archetypes, each embodying a powerful force in the Silicon Valley narrative. On one side stood the protagonist, the relentless pursuer of truth, the one who would meticulously peel back the layers of a meticulously constructed illusion. On the other, the antagonist, a figure of almost mythical allure, who harnessed the potent cocktail of charisma and technological mystique to build an empire on a foundation of sand. Our protagonist in this high-stakes drama was not a lone wolf, but rather a collective force, embodied by the dogged determination of investigative journalists and the unwavering commitment of government regulators. These were the unsung heroes who operated in the shadows, far from the dazzling spotlight that perpetually followed the antagonist. They were the ones who refused to be swayed by the siren song of a revolutionary technology, the ones who saw through the meticulously crafted facade of innovation. Their weapon was not a charismatic pitch or a captivating vision, but rather an unyielding dedication to facts, to data, to the laborious process of verification. They were the skeptics in a world that craved belief, the truth seekers in an echo chamber of hype. Their preparation was exhaustive, their methods painstaking. They delved into obscure patents, scrutinized financial statements that were intentionally opaque, and interviewed countless former employees, each harboring fragments of a deeply troubling secret. They represented the unglamorous yet absolutely essential counterpoint to the dazzling, often misleading, narrative spun by Silicon Valley's self-appointed prophets. They were the authentic voice of due diligence, the quiet force of accountability that, in the end, proved to be the ultimate undoing of a fabricated empire. Then there was the antagonist, Elizabeth Holmes, a figure crafted in the crucible of ambition, molded by the irresistible force of Silicon Valley's hyper-accelerated success culture. She was the embodiment of the fake it till you make it mantra, taken to its most extreme, most dangerous conclusion. From the outset, Holmes presented herself as a visionary, a prodigy destined to disrupt an antiquated industry. Her uniform was a carefully chosen black turtleneck, a deliberate echo of Steve Jobs, signaling a profound, almost messianic connection to innovation. Her voice, unnaturally deep and resonant, commanded attention, lending an air of profound gravitas to even the most outlandish claims. Every gesture, every pronouncement was precisely calibrated, designed to project an image of unshakable confidence, of a genius operating on a plane far beyond the comprehension of mere mortals. She moved with an almost ethereal grace, yet beneath the polished exterior, there was an unmistakable undercurrent of something theatrical, something performative. It was the performance of a lifetime, played out on the grandest stage imaginable, with real human lives and billions of dollars as the stakes. Holmes wasn't merely an ambitious entrepreneur. She was a master illusionist, capable of conjuring belief out of thin air. She understood the psychology of wealth and power, the desire of established titans to be part of the next big thing, to back a disruptive force that would cement their legacy. She tapped into their fear of missing out, their hunger for the next generational leap in technology. Her background, though initially shrouded in a carefully curated mystique, eventually revealed a trajectory defined by a singular, unwavering focus on achieving extraordinary wealth and influence, even if the means to that end remained stubbornly undefined. She dropped out of Stanford, a move celebrated as a mark of independent genius, further solidifying her image as a maverick charting her own course, unbound by conventional wisdom. She spoke of her personal fear of needles, a seemingly innocuous detail that served to humanize her grand vision of revolutionizing blood testing. This narrative, repeated countless times, was designed to resonate deeply with a public wary of traditional healthcare and eager for a more accessible, less invasive alternative. What she represented, at its core, was the seductive danger of unbridled optimism divorced from verifiable progress. She promised a future where a single drop of blood could unlock a universe of diagnostic information, accessible to everyone, everywhere. This was not merely a business proposition. It was a humanitarian crusade, draped in the cloak of scientific breakthrough. This moralistic framing disarmed critics and attracted a powerful, influential board of directors, largely comprised of political and military figures with little to no scientific background, but immense social capital. These were individuals whose reputations lent an air of legitimacy to Theranos, even as its actual technological capabilities remained shrouded in impenetrable secrecy. Their presence on the board, cultivated through skillful networking and persuasive rhetoric, became another layer in the elaborate facade, a powerful endorsement that shielded Holmes from the kind of rigorous technical scrutiny that would have quickly exposed the truth. This dynamic, the authentic, painstaking pursuit of truth against a dazzling, often misleading, power of charismatic delusion, formed the very heart of the Theranos saga. It was a clash between the painstaking work of scientific validation and the intoxicating allure of disruption at any cost. Her strategy was a masterclass in obfuscation. The Theranos labs were shrouded in secrecy, accessible only to a select few, and even then, under tightly controlled conditions. Proprietary technology was the catch-all excuse for any lack of transparency, a convenient shield against legitimate inquiry. The company operated with an almost cult-like devotion to its leader, fostering an environment where dissent was stifled and loyalty was paramount. Employees who questioned the technology's efficacy or the veracity of Holmes's claims were swiftly marginalized or dismissed, their concerns swept under the rug as corporate espionage or simply a lack of belief in the grand vision. This internal suppression of truth mirrored the external manipulation of perception. Holmes was adept at leveraging media and public relations to amplify her narrative. She cultivated relationships with influential journalists, granting exclusive interviews that painted her as a groundbreaking innovator, a fearless disruptor challenging the status quo. These articles, often lacking in critical technical examination, served to further cement her public image as a visionary, drawing in more investors and attracting top talent eager to be part of what appeared to be the next Silicon Valley juggernaut. The narrative became self-perpetuating. Positive media coverage fueled investor interest, which in turn generated more positive media coverage, creating a virtuous cycle of hype that masked a fundamental absence of genuine progress. The antagonist, in essence, represented the dark side of the American dream, the idea that, with enough ambition, enough self-belief, and enough persuasive storytelling, one could manifest reality, even if that reality was a complete fabrication. She embodied the Silicon Valley archetype of the disruptor who operates outside traditional rules, an iconoclast whose genius is so profound it cannot be constrained by conventional limitations. This narrative was incredibly potent, especially in an era where venture capital was flowing freely and investors were eager to identify and back the next Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg. Holmes skillfully exploited this hunger for the next big thing, presenting herself as the embodiment of that very aspiration. Her youth, her gender in a male-dominated tech world, and her compelling personal story all played into a powerful, almost irresistible narrative that disarmed skepticism and encouraged belief over evidence. Her brilliance lay not in scientific discovery, but in psychological manipulation. She understood that confidence could be a more powerful currency than competence, at least in the short term. She knew that the fear of missing out, combined with the desire to be associated with a world-changing enterprise, could blind even the most seasoned investors to the obvious red flags. She built a castle of cards, meticulously crafted from the desires and aspirations of those around her, using their own hopes and fears as the very bricks and mortar of her illusion. The true villainy wasn't just the deception itself, but the way it preyed upon the very human desire for progress and the trust placed in those who promised to deliver it. It was a betrayal of the purest ideals of innovation, warping them into a vehicle for personal gain, leaving a trail of shattered dreams and squandered fortunes in its wake. This established the stage for a confrontation that would expose the fragile foundation of her empire and force a reckoning with the stark difference between genuine innovation and outright fraud. It was this potent combination of magnetic charisma, carefully constructed secrecy, and an almost messianic narrative that allowed Elizabeth Holmes to ascend to such dizzying heights, attracting a constellation of influential backers and an estimated valuation of $9 billion, all without ever truly proving her core technological claims. Her entire existence, for a crucial period, was a performance, a meticulously choreographed ballet of half-truths and outright falsehoods designed to keep the money flowing and the spotlight fixed firmly upon her. The narrative she wove was so compelling, so aspirational, that it became almost impossible for many to distinguish between the audacious vision she espoused and the stark, painful reality lurking beneath the surface. This was not merely a business, it was a cult of personality, built on the promise of a medical revolution that existed only in the realm of carefully managed perception. And it was against this formidable, meticulously constructed edifice of illusion that the relentless forces of truth would eventually array themselves, setting the stage for an inevitable and spectacular collapse. This inherent conflict between manufactured reality and inconvenient truth would define the core of the upcoming showdown. The confrontation that was about to unfold was far more than a simple legal battle or a corporate dispute. It transcended the confines of a courtroom or the pages of a business journal, elevating itself into a monumental struggle for the very soul of technological innovation and, by extension, the integrity of the American promise. This was not merely about a startup or a deceptive founder. It was about the fundamental values that underpin progress, trust, and accountability in a society increasingly reliant on audacious visionaries and disruptive technologies. The stakes were impossibly high, extending far beyond the billions of dollars that had been squandered and the reputations of the powerful figures who had been duped. This was a fight to determine whether ambition, untethered from ethical boundaries, could continue to reign supreme, or if a new era of transparency and verifiable truth would finally assert its dominance. At its core, the Theranos saga became a microcosm of a larger philosophical battle, the clash between the intoxicating allure of disruption at any cost and the fundamental necessity of scientific rigor and ethical conduct. Silicon Valley, for years, had cultivated a culture where failure was celebrated as a stepping stone to success, where audacious claims were often rewarded more than proven results, and where the mantra of move fast and break things sometimes extended beyond software into the very fabric of trust. Elizabeth Holmes, with her messianic pronouncements and seemingly limitless ambition, had become the ultimate embodiment of this ethos. Her success, even if fleeting and built on sand, threatened to validate a dangerous precedent that one could bypass established scientific protocols, ignore inconvenient facts, and still achieve monumental success through sheer force of personality and a compelling narrative. If she were to escape accountability, it would send a chilling message that the pursuit of innovation could be divorced from the inconvenient realities of truth and integrity. The very future of how venture capital would be deployed, how startups would be vetted, and how the public would perceive technological breakthroughs hung in the balance. Would investors continue to pour billions into ventures based solely on charismatic pitches and impressive PowerPoint presentations? Or would a newfound skepticism force a return to fundamental due diligence? Would the media continue to lionize visionaries without critical examination, or would a more rigorous investigative approach become the norm? These were not abstract questions. They were pressing concerns that had direct implications for the health of the entire innovation ecosystem. The Theranos case was poised to become a landmark moment, a cautionary tale etched into the collective consciousness, or a troubling precedent that would embolden future charlatans. Moreover, the case laid bare the vulnerabilities of traditional power structures when confronted with a sufficiently compelling narrative. The board of directors at Theranos read like a who's who of American political and military might, yet their lack of scientific expertise and their trust in Holmes's carefully curated image rendered them incapable of performing effective oversight. This raised profound questions about accountability at the highest levels and the potential for influential figures to be swayed by charisma over substance. The exposure of Theranos wasn't just about a company, it was about the systemic failures that allowed such a monumental fraud to proliferate and persist for so long, shielded by the very prestige of its powerful backers. It became a harsh lesson in the dangers of intellectual capture and the seductive power of an exclusive club. The human element further amplified the stakes. Thousands of patients had been subjected to potentially inaccurate blood tests, leading to misdiagnoses, unnecessary anxiety, and potentially life-threatening delays in proper medical care. The promise of accessible, affordable, and revolutionary healthcare had been cruelly exploited, transforming a beacon of hope into a source of profound harm. This wasn't just a financial crime, it was a public health scandal of immense proportions. The victims extended beyond the wealthy investors. They included ordinary individuals who had placed their trust in a company promising a brighter, healthier future. Their stories, when they finally emerged, added a poignant, deeply human dimension to the unfolding drama, transforming it from a mere corporate collapse into a testament of profound betrayal. This made the confrontation not just a legal battle, but a moral imperative. It became a demand for justice on behalf of those who had been deceived, a plea for accountability from those who had enabled the deception, and a critical examination of the very culture that had allowed such a grand illusion to flourish. narrative pivoted from one of technological marvel to one of ethical reckoning, forcing a painful but necessary introspection into the unchecked power of ambition and the corrosive effects of unchecked hubris. The stage was set for a showdown that would define an era, a moment where the harsh glare of truth would finally pierce through the meticulously crafted fog of deception, forever altering the landscape of innovation and corporate responsibility. The confrontation promised to be a brutal dissection of a carefully constructed myth. It was the ultimate test of whether the overwhelming force of a charismatic persona, backed by a carefully cultivated network of influence, could withstand the relentless, unyielding pressure of undeniable facts and meticulously gathered evidence. This was not a debate of opinions. It was a battle for objective reality, where one side possessed a compelling narrative and the other, the cold, hard proof. The fight for the soul of Silicon Valley, for the integrity of technological promises, and for the very concept of verifiable truth was about to reach its crescendo. The world watched, captivated, as the seemingly impenetrable fortress of Theranos began to crumble under the sustained assault of truth. What started as whispers of doubt among former employees and industry insiders had grown into a crescendo of public skepticism, fueled by persistent investigative journalism. This wasn't a sudden collapse. It was a slow, agonizing unraveling, a testament to the sheer scale of the deception and the immense power wielded by its architect. The initial attacks on Theranos and Elizabeth Holmes were often dismissed as jealousy or misunderstanding from those who simply couldn't grasp her visionary genius. But the relentless pursuit of facts, often through the laborious process of cross-referencing internal documents with external claims, began to chip away at the narrative of revolutionary success. The first major cracks appeared when skeptical journalists, most notably John Carreyrou of the Wall Street Journal, began to publish deeply researched exposés. These articles, painstakingly pieced together from interviews with disillusioned former employees and independent experts, painted a starkly different picture than the one propagated by Theranos. They revealed that the proprietary Edison device, hailed as a miniaturized lab capable of performing hundreds of tests from a single drop of blood, was largely not functional. Many tests, it was revealed, were actually being run on modified commercial machines from other companies or through traditional venipuncture, completely undermining the core premise of Theranos' revolutionary technology. These initial reports were met with fierce denial from Holmes and her legal team, who threatened lawsuits and attempted to intimidate whistleblowers, but the dam had broken. The true weight of the confrontation, however, came with the regulatory investigations and subsequent legal proceedings. Government agencies, spurred by the mounting evidence and public outcry, launched their own probes. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services issued damning reports, detailing critical deficiencies in Theranos' lab practices, citing conditions that posed immediate jeopardy to patient health and safety. These were not abstract accusations. They were concrete findings from rigorous inspections, detailing unsanitary conditions, faulty equipment, and a pervasive lack of quality control. The medical community, once cautiously optimistic, became openly critical, their professional skepticism finally validated by irrefutable evidence. This meticulous accumulation of evidence was the antithesis of Holmes's modus operandi. While she dealt in grand visions and futuristic promises, her adversaries dealt in cold, hard data. They presented audit reports, technical analyses, and sworn testimonies that systematically dismantled every one of Theranos' claims. They had the receipts, not just anecdotal grievances, but documented proof of manipulated data, failed validation studies, and an alarming disregard for patient safety. Each piece of evidence was a brick removed from Holmes's carefully constructed illusion, revealing the hollow space beneath. The confrontation was becoming less about a debate, and more about a forensic examination, laying bare the profound chasm between what Theranos claimed to do and what it was actually capable of. The stakes had been raised, the battle lines drawn, and the stage was set for the ultimate reckoning. The air in the courtroom crackled with anticipation, a palpable energy that transcended the sterile environment. This was the moment the world had been waiting for, the direct, unvarnished confrontation between the carefully constructed myth of Elizabeth Holmes and the unforgiving reality of irrefutable proof. Her carefully cultivated image, once an impenetrable shield, was about to be put to the ultimate test under the harsh glare of public and judicial scrutiny. The antagonist, Elizabeth Holmes, entered the arena with the same composed demeanor, the deep, unwavering gaze, the signature black attire that had become her personal brand. She was still projecting the image of a visionary, a victim of misunderstanding, a pioneer whose revolutionary ideas were simply too far ahead of their time for lesser minds to grasp. Her attack, when it came, was not a sudden, explosive outburst, but a more insidious, calculated maneuver, an attempt to deflect, to reframe, to shift blame, and to cling desperately to the narrative she had so meticulously crafted. Her strategy was multi-pronged, designed to sow doubt and confusion, to paint herself as a misunderstood genius facing an onslaught from entrenched interests. She argued, with practiced conviction, that Theranos had been a victim of a smear campaign orchestrated by powerful competitors threatened by her disruptive technology. She spoke of the relentless pursuit of innovation, the challenges inherent in pioneering new frontiers, and the inevitable resistance faced by those who dare to challenge the status quo. Her voice, though sometimes faltering under direct pressure, largely maintained its deep resonance, a tool expertly wielded to convey authority and conviction, even in the face of mounting evidence. She implied that the government's investigations were politically motivated, a conspiracy to stifle a groundbreaking American success story. This narrative, while lacking any concrete basis, appealed to a certain segment of the public skeptical of established institutions and sympathetic to the underdog. Holmes meticulously attempted to discredit the whistleblowers, painting them as disgruntled former employees with personal vendettas or a lack of understanding of the complex science involved. She described them as individuals who simply didn't believe in the mission, or who were incapable of comprehending the intricacies of Theranos' proprietary technology. She dismissed the damning findings of the Wall Street Journal, alleging that reporter John Carreyrou was biased, driven by a desire to bring down a successful startup. She claimed that the articles were based on incomplete information and misinterpretations, asserting that the true capabilities of Theranos' devices were simply not understood by outsiders. This was the classic maneuver of attacking the messenger, when the message itself is inconvenient, a desperate attempt to undermine the credibility of those exposing the truth. Her most audacious defense revolved around the claim of proprietary trade secrets. Whenever specifics about the Edison device's functionality, or the methodology behind the blood tests, were demanded, she and her legal team would invoke the shield of confidentiality. This became a convenient black box, a catch-all explanation for every unanswered question, every unexplained discrepancy. They maintained that revealing too much detail would compromise Theranos' intellectual property, thereby protecting the company from its competitors. This highly opaque strategy had worked for years, allowing Theranos to operate in a vacuum, shielded from the rigorous scientific peer review and validation that is standard practice in the medical device industry. She presented herself as a guardian of revolutionary secrets, too precious and vulnerable to be exposed to the uninitiated. Furthermore, Holmes sought to portray any failures as a natural part of the innovation process, a series of learning experiences on the path to ultimate success. She spoke of the iterative nature of scientific development, of the challenges in scaling up a nascent technology, and of the inevitable setbacks that accompany any truly disruptive endeavor. She argued that perfection was an unrealistic expectation for a company attempting to revolutionize an entire industry. This framing attempted to normalize the extensive failures and inaccuracies of Theranos' technology, recharacterizing them as mere bumps in the road rather than fundamental flaws indicative of outright deception. She consistently tried to shift the focus from what Theranos couldn't do to what it aspired to do. Presenting intent as equivalent to achievement, the theatricality of her performance was undeniable. Every answer was carefully measured, every pause seemingly deliberate. She maintained eye contact, projected an aura of sincerity, and often reverted to the well-rehearsed talking points that had charmed investors and politicians for years. She was performing the role of the beleaguered visionary, the one who saw the future but was being unjustly persecuted by those clinging to the past. Her attempts to deflect and pivot were a masterclass in rhetorical maneuvering, designed to create enough smoke and mirrors to obscure the glaring absence of substance. Yet, beneath the polished exterior, a growing sense of desperation began to emerge. As the relentless pressure of irrefutable facts slowly but surely began to erode her carefully constructed facade, the sheer weight of the evidence, meticulously gathered and systematically presented, was an opposing force that no amount of charisma or practiced deflection could ultimately withstand. The stage was now set for the methodical, devastating take that would dismantle her elaborate illusion, piece by agonizing piece. This was not a quick knockout. It was a slow, deliberate strangulation of a lie, carried out with the precision of a surgeon and the force of an oncoming tide. The prosecution, representing the collective effort of whistleblowers, investigative journalists, and regulatory bodies, began their methodical takedown. Their approach was the antithesis of Holmes's performative grandiosity. It was a cold, hard, data-driven assault, built on an unshakable foundation of evidence. They had done their homework, gathered their receipts, and now they were ready to present them. The first blow against Holmes's narrative of a targeted smear campaign came from the very people she sought to discredit, the former Theranos employees, the true whistleblowers. These individuals, many of whom had risked their careers and faced significant intimidation tactics, provided devastating testimony. They recounted internal communications showing top executives, including Holmes herself, were fully aware that the Edison device was not performing as advertised. They described being pressured to falsify data, to exaggerate capabilities to investors, and to hide the true limitations of the technology from partners like Walgreens. One former lab director testified that she specifically warned Holmes about the severe accuracy issues, only to be ignored. Another detailed how the company deliberately ran tests on traditional third-party machines, despite public claims that all tests were performed on Theranos' proprietary technology. Their testimonies were not anecdotal grievances. They were detailed, first-hand accounts, often corroborated by internal emails and documents, creating an undeniable pattern of deception that reached the very top of the Pacta organization. The financial receipts were equally damning. Auditors and forensic accountants meticulously dissected Theranos' financial statements, revealing a deliberate misrepresentation of revenue and operational capabilities. The company's valuation, presented as a testament to its groundbreaking technology, was shown to be built on optimistic projections and investor hype, rather than tangible, verifiable performance. Documents proved that significant revenue figures were inflated, and key performance indicators were either fabricated or grossly exaggerated to secure further rounds of funding. This wasn't merely aggressive accounting, it was systematic fraud, designed to lure in unsuspecting investors with the promise of exponential growth. Based on non-existent technological breakthroughs, the prosecution showed that hundreds of millions of dollars were raised on the back of these falsified numbers, directly linking the deception to the inflow of capital. But the most devastating blow came from the scientific and regulatory evidence. This was the irrefutable proof that directly countered Holmes's claims of groundbreaking innovation. Expert witnesses, independent scientists, and former FDA and CMS officials presented overwhelming evidence that the Edison device was fundamentally flawed and often produced inaccurate and unreliable results. They showed how Theranos failed basic quality control assessments, consistently violated laboratory regulations, and actively concealed its deficiencies from regulatory bodies. Detailed reports from government inspections laid bare the egregious conditions in Theranos' labs, including instances of contaminated samples, improperly calibrated machines, and a staggering lack of adherence to medical best practices. The prosecution presented internal Theranos documents, emails, memos, and even design specifications that demonstrated the company was fully aware of the Edison device's limitations, yet continued to market it as a revolutionary diagnostic tool. One particularly damaging piece of evidence was an internal report detailing the high failure rates of the Edison system in early trials, a report that was deliberately withheld from investors and partners. Another critical revelation was the side-by-side comparison of results from Theranos' machines versus traditional, established laboratory equipment, which consistently showed significant discrepancies in the Theranos readings. These were not minor variances. They were clinically significant differences that could lead to dangerous misdiagnoses. They showed how the company actively misled pharmaceutical partners, showcasing doctored demonstrations of their technology. They exposed how blood samples were deliberately diluted or manipulated to achieve successful results in front of potential investors, only to fail miserably in real-world applications. The grand claims of testing hundreds of diseases from a finger prick of blood were systematically dismantled, revealing that only a handful of tests could even be attempted on the Edison, and those with highly unreliable results. The single drop of blood narrative, the very foundation of Theranos' appeal, was exposed as a dangerous fantasy, leading to patients being retested or receiving incorrect diagnoses. This was the ultimate takedown, a calm, methodical, evidence-based dismantling of every single claim, every single promise, and every single carefully constructed lie that formed the very foundation of the Theranos empire. The methodical dismantling of Holmes's carefully constructed narrative continued, each piece of evidence serving as a precision strike against her increasingly fragile defense. The prosecution presented undeniable proof that Theranos not only exaggerated its capabilities, but actively engaged in deceptive practices to obscure the truth. One of the most damning revelations came in the form of internal emails and instant messages between Holmes and her top lieutenants, including Ramesh Sunny Balwani, her former boyfriend, and Theranos' chief operating officer. These communications directly contradicted Holmes's claims of ignorance or good faith error. They showed deliberate discussions about delaying regulatory submissions, intentionally avoiding rigorous external validation, and crafting misleading public statements. These were not the musings of an overwhelmed visionary. They were the calculated exchanges of individuals actively participating in a widespread cover-up. The digital paper trail proved to be an inescapable snare. Furthermore, the prosecution unveiled a series of doctored demonstrations and investor pitches. They presented recordings and transcripts of meetings where Holmes presented fabricated performance data, showing the Edison device achieving results it was incapable of producing. In one particularly egregious instance, it was revealed that Theranos had rigged a demonstration for a major pharmaceutical company by secretly running blood samples through traditional, commercially available machines off-site, while presenting the results as if they had come directly from their proprietary Edison device. This was outright fraud, not merely optimistic projections. The sheer audacity of these staged events underscored the depth of the deception and Holmes's willingness to go to extreme lengths to maintain the illusion of success. The presentation of these recordings in court, allowing the jury and the public to hear Holmes's confident pronouncements knowing the deception behind them, was devastating. Beyond the internal communications and rigged demonstrations, the prosecution meticulously outlined the financial fraud, They presented intricate flowcharts showing how investor money was systematically diverted and spent on lavish personal expenses, expensive legal battles to silence critics, and maintaining the elaborate facade of a thriving company, rather than genuinely investing in scientific research and development to fix the core technological issues. They revealed that Theranos was essentially a Ponzi scheme of aspiration, where new investor money was used to prop up the illusion, pay salaries, and fend off bankruptcy, all while the underlying technology remained fatally flawed. This demonstrated a clear intent to defraud, showing that the company's operations were less about medical innovation and more about perpetuating a cycle of fundraising based on false pretenses. The financial records were a cold, hard repudiation of Holmes's claims of altruistic mission. The testimony from independent experts further solidified the takedown. Renowned scientists, medical ethicists, and laboratory directors provided comprehensive analyses of Theranos' technology and practices. They systematically explained why the Edison device, based on its fundamental design and the principles of blood chemistry, could not possibly achieve the claims made by Holmes. They detailed the insurmountable technical hurdles, the inherent limitations of the proposed methodology, and the complete absence of scientific validation for any of Theranos' purported breakthroughs. Their testimony was delivered with clinical precision, devoid of emotion, relying solely on established scientific principles and peer-reviewed standards. This was the voice of reason and empirical truth, directly confronting the fantastical claims that had fueled Theranos' meteoric rise. They provided the scientific context that exposed the absurdity of Holmes's technical assertions. Perhaps one of the most poignant aspects of the takedown involved the direct impact on patients. The prosecution introduced evidence of patients who received inaccurate Theranos test results, leading to serious medical consequences. There were heartbreaking accounts of individuals being told they had life-threatening conditions based on faulty Theranos readings, only to later discover they were healthy after retesting with reputable labs. Conversely, there were instances where serious conditions were missed by Theranos tests, delaying critical diagnoses and treatments. These personal stories, far more than abstract financial figures, underscored the profound human cost of Holmes's deception. They transformed the abstract concept of fraud into a tangible, devastating reality, revealing the direct harm inflicted upon unsuspecting individuals who had put their trust in Theranos for their most personal health information. The presentation of these patient impact statements was a powerful emotional anchor, grounding the complex legal and financial arguments in the stark reality of human suffering. The collective weight of this evidence, internal communications, doctored demonstrations, financial irregularities, expert scientific testimony, and the harrowing accounts of patient harm created an inescapable net around Elizabeth Holmes. Each piece reinforced the others, building an unassailable case that meticulously chronicled a systematic, deliberate pattern of deception and fraud. Her carefully crafted facade, once seemingly impenetrable, was not just cracked, it was shattered into 1,000 pieces under the relentless assault of truth. The calm, methodical presentation of these irrefutable receipts left no room for doubt, no space for alternative explanations, and no credibility for her desperate attempts to deflect blame or claim misunderstanding. The confrontation was no longer a battle of wills or narratives. It was a conclusive victory of facts over fiction, of substance over illusion. The once charismatic visionary was stripped bare, exposed not as a misunderstood genius, but as the orchestrator of a monumental deception. The world watched as the empire of lies crumbled, leaving behind a stark warning etched into the annals of innovation and ethics. The takedown continued with surgical precision, meticulously dissecting every layer of the Theranos illusion. The prosecution brought forth detailed, internal validation studies that Theranos itself had conducted, which starkly contradicted the public claims made by Elizabeth Holmes. These studies, unearthed from internal servers, showed consistently poor performance, high error rates, and a complete inability of the Edison device to accurately perform the vast majority of tests it was advertised for. This was not a matter of external critics misinterpreting data. This was Theranos' own data, demonstrating their technology's profound failures. The revelation that the company was aware of these internal findings, yet continued to solicit investments and partner with major retailers, underscored the deliberate nature of the fraud. This irrefutable evidence from within Theranos' own walls left no room for the defense to claim ignorance or honest mistakes. Further undermining Holmes's credibility were past statements she had made under oath or in media interviews that were now directly contradicted by the evidence. The prosecution presented clips of her confidently asserting the Edison's capabilities, claiming it could run hundreds of tests from a single fingerprick of blood, all while internal documents revealed it could barely perform a handful, and often inaccurately. Her carefully cultivated image as a transparent, mission-driven leader crumbled under the weight of her own recorded words, juxtaposed with the damning reality. The stark contrast between her public pronouncements and the private facts painted a picture of calculated deception, not misguided optimism. This was a particularly devastating blow, as it exposed the deep chasm between her persona and her actions. The testimony of high-ranking former employees who were once fiercely loyal to Holmes proved particularly impactful. These individuals, initially believers in the Theranos mission, recounted how they became disillusioned and increasingly uncomfortable with the company's deceptive practices. They described a culture of fear and intimidation, where dissent was not tolerated, and anyone who raised concerns about the technology's flaws was quickly ostracized or threatened with legal action. One former chemist vividly described how he was instructed to manually manipulate data to make test results appear more favorable, a direct order from management. These personal accounts, delivered with clear remorse and a sense of betrayal, humanized the fraud, revealing the immense pressure and ethical compromises faced by those working within the Theranos ecosystem. Their stories exposed the systemic nature of the deception, demonstrating that it was not merely the actions of one individual, but a deeply ingrained corporate culture of misrepresentation. The prosecution also provided a chilling account of Theranos' attempts to evade regulatory oversight. They presented evidence that the company deliberately sought to circumvent FDA approval for its devices, attempting to market them under loopholes or by rebranding them to avoid rigorous scrutiny. They detailed instances where Theranos deliberately hid non-compliant lab practices from inspectors and attempted to influence regulatory outcomes through lobbying efforts and strategic political appointments. This demonstrated a deliberate and systematic effort to operate outside the established frameworks designed to protect public health, all in service of maintaining the illusion of a breakthrough technology that didn't exist. This aggressive side of regulations further cemented the image of a company prioritizing profit and perception over patient safety and scientific integrity. The meticulous presentation of this overwhelming body of evidence left Holmes's defense team scrambling. Their attempts to introduce alternative explanations or shift blame became increasingly desperate and less convincing. Every counterargument was met with a barrage of documented facts, every deflection with a pre-prepared receipt that directly refuted her claims. The narrative of the misunderstood visionary, the target of a witch hunt, evaporated under the relentless and undeniable weight of truth. The confrontation was no longer just about exposing the fraud, it was about proving the calculated, intentional nature of that fraud, stripping away any pretense of good faith or innocent error. The cumulative effect was devastating, leaving no doubt in the minds of the observers that Elizabeth Holmes was not just mistaken but had deliberately orchestrated a massive deception. This meticulous, almost clinical dissection of the Theranos operation provided the final, definitive nails in the coffin of Holmes's credibility. The sheer volume and consistency of the evidence, emanating from multiple independent sources and corroborated by Theranos' own internal documents, painted an irrefutable picture of systematic fraud. The calm, unwavering presentation of these facts, devoid of sensationalism, underscored their undeniable power. There was no theatricality needed from the prosecution. The truth, plainly laid bare, was dramatic enough. The confrontation had moved beyond the realm of speculation and accusation, firmly into the realm of undeniable fact, sealing the fate of the protagonist and forever cementing the cautionary tale of Theranos. The takedown was complete. The final blows in the confrontation were not delivered with a sudden flourish, but with the quiet, devastating impact of absolute certainty. The prosecution culminated their takedown by illustrating the profound and widespread impact of Holmes's deception on all levels, from the individual investors who lost their life savings, to the powerful figures whose reputations were irrevocably tarnished, and most critically, to the patients whose health was jeopardized. They presented expert testimony on the psychological and financial toll suffered by those who had invested heavily in Theranos, showing detailed analyses of their financial losses and the personal devastation caused by the betrayal of trust. These were not just statistics, they were stories of shattered dreams and squandered futures, directly linked to the promises made by Holmes. Perhaps the most visceral and emotionally resonant part of the final takedown was the unvarnished portrayal of the direct impact on patient health. While earlier parts of the prosecution's case detailed the inaccuracies, this section focused on the very real consequences. Doctors testified about receiving highly unreliable Theranos results that directly conflicted with established diagnostic methods, leading to confusion, alarm, and unnecessary anxiety for their patients. There were instances where patients underwent invasive procedures or began taking medications based on erroneous Theranos diagnoses. Conversely, patients with serious conditions were given false negatives, delaying crucial interventions and potentially worsening their prognoses. The medical community, initially cautiously optimistic about Theranos' potential, now stood united in condemning its practices, providing expert medical opinions on the clinical dangers posed by the company's flawed technology. This wasn't just about financial loss, it was about public health and safety, bringing the human cost of the deception into sharp, painful focus. The prosecution also effectively dismantled any lingering notion that Holmes was merely a naive, overly ambitious entrepreneur who got caught up in circumstances beyond her control. They methodically presented evidence that she was not only aware of the fundamental flaws in her technology but actively directed efforts to conceal them. They highlighted her consistent resistance to transparent scientific validation, her preference for secrecy over scrutiny, and her direct involvement in fabricating data and misleading presentations. This was not a case of passive ignorance. It was a demonstration of active, intentional manipulation. The receipts were now so overwhelming and interconnected that they formed an undeniable mosaic of deliberate fraud, leaving no credible room for an innocent explanation. The very structure of the Theranos company, designed for extreme opacity and a cult of personality around Holmes, was presented as further proof of intent. The highly compartmentalized departments, the strict non-disclosure agreements, the lack of traditional scientific peer review processes, and the suppression of internal dissent were all cited as systemic mechanisms put in place to perpetuate the deception. It wasn't just individual acts of misleading. It was a corporate architecture built to facilitate and protect the fraud. The prosecution meticulously traced the chain of command, demonstrating that major deceptive decisions originated from or were directly approved by Holmes, firmly placing the responsibility for the entire scheme at her feet. In the end, the Takedown was a masterclass in evidentiary presentation, combining meticulous financial forensics, compelling whistleblower testimony, damning internal documents, unimpeachable scientific expert analysis, and heartbreaking patient impact statements. It left no stone unturned, no claim unchallenged, and no defense intact. The confrontation culminated not in a shout, but in the quiet, undeniable resonance of truth. The once unshakable confidence of Elizabeth Holmes visibly wanted under the relentless pressure. The dramatic arc of the story, from audacious vision to public humiliation, was complete. The finality of the evidence presented left no doubt as to the veracity of the accusations, firmly establishing her role as the architect and driving force behind one of the most audacious and damaging frauds in Silicon Valley history. The confrontation was over, the judgment inevitable. The reverberations of the confrontation were immediate and cataclysmic, sending shockwaves far beyond the confines of the courtroom and shaking the very foundations of Silicon Valley's often unchecked optimism. The total victory for truth and accountability was undeniable, a resounding triumph that left Elizabeth Holmes's once gilded empire in absolute ruins. The fallout was not merely a corporate collapse, it was a cultural reckoning, a cautionary tale that instantly became etched into the collective consciousness, forever changing the narrative around disruptive innovation and the dangerous allure of charismatic leadership. Social media, the modern town square, erupted in an unprecedented firestorm of reaction. The moment the evidence became undeniable, the public, once enamored by the Theranos story, turned with a visceral blend of anger, disbelief, and a grim satisfaction. Twitter, in particular, became a torrent of scathing commentary. Hashtags like #Theranos fraud, #Elizabeth Holmes lies, and #receipts served trended globally for days, each tweet a nail in the coffin of her public image. Memes depicting Holmes's signature black turtleneck and unblinking gaze, once symbols of enigmatic genius, were repurposed into biting satire, morphing her into a symbol of corporate deception. Viral videos juxtaposed her confident pronouncements with the stark reality revealed in court, drawing millions of views and further cementing her downfall in the popular imagination. The online world, which had once amplified her myth, now became the engine of its destruction, a relentless echo chamber of condemnation. Public sentiment was a runaway train, leaving no doubt that her fall from grace was complete and irreversible. The media, both traditional and digital, reacted with a veracity that matched the scandal's magnitude. News outlets that had once profiled Holmes as a visionary genius now ran headlines that screamed of betrayal and fraud. The billion-dollar lie unraveled. How Elizabeth Holmes deceived Silicon Valley blazed across front pages, accompanied by grim-faced photographs of the once celebrated CEO. Major financial publications, which had previously lauded Theranos as a unicorn, published scathing postmortems detailing the intricate web of deception. Investigative journalists, particularly John Carrero of the Wall Street Journal, who had tirelessly pursued the truth despite immense pressure and legal threats from Theranos, were vindicated as heroes. Their earlier exposures now recognized as monumental feats of investigative reporting. The media narrative shifted from one of potential breakthrough to outright scandal, with every detail of the fraud picked apart and analyzed for lessons learned. The sheer volume of negative coverage was overwhelming, painting a comprehensive picture of a company built on a foundation of lies. The antagonist's career, once soaring to dizzying heights, imploded with spectacular speed and finality. Elizabeth Holmes, once hailed as the youngest self-made female billionaire, saw her net worth evaporate to zero overnight. Her carefully constructed public image as a visionary innovator shattered beyond repair. Board members, once powerful figures who had lent Theranos immense credibility, scrambled to distance themselves, issuing statements of regret and feigned ignorance, though their reputations were inevitably tarnished by association. The political and business elite who had championed her now faced uncomfortable questions about their due diligence and susceptibility to charismatic narratives. Holmes became a pariah, her name synonymous with hubris and deception. Investment firms that had poured money into Theranos faced intense scrutiny and public criticism for their failure to properly vet the company, leading to internal reviews and a newfound caution in the venture capital world. The fall was not merely professional. It was a profound personal and reputational annihilation, leaving her with virtually no allies or defenders in the public sphere. Conversely, the protagonist, the relentless pursuit of truth embodied by the whistleblowers, journalists and regulators, experienced a profound triumph. Whistleblowers like Tyler Schultz and Erica Chung, who had faced intimidation, legal threats, and immense personal sacrifice, were lauded as heroes for their courage and integrity. Their bravery in standing up to a powerful, well-funded corporation became a beacon of hope for ethical conduct in the tech industry. John Carrero's investigative journalism became a textbook example of tenacious reporting holding power accountable, earning him widespread acclaim and further solidifying the importance of independent media in a rapidly changing world. Regulatory bodies, often criticized for being too slow or too lenient, were seen to have ultimately acted decisively, demonstrating the critical role of oversight in protecting public welfare. This victory was a validation of the painstaking, often unglamorous work of gathering facts and upholding ethical standards, proving that truth, however inconvenient, would ultimately prevail over deception. However elaborate, this total victory extended beyond the individual fates of those involved. It sent a clear, unmistakable message to the entire ecosystem of innovation. The era of fake it till you make it without genuine technological substance was put on notice. Investors began to demand more rigorous due diligence, scrutinizing claims with a newfound skepticism. Startups found that charismatic pitches alone were no longer sufficient. Verifiable data, scientific validation, and transparent practices became increasingly paramount. The Theranos scandal became a stark reminder that even in the pursuit of revolutionary ideas, ethical boundaries and factual integrity could not be sacrificed. It was a cleansing moment, painful but necessary, forcing the industry to confront its own vulnerabilities and reevaluate its core values. The triumph of the truth in the Theranos saga served as a powerful, enduring testament to the enduring power of facts, accountability, and the courage to expose deception, no matter how powerful its architect. The media's hunger for every detail of the Theranos implosion was insatiable, and for good reason. It was a saga that perfectly encapsulated the dangers of unchecked ambition, the seductive power of Silicon Valley hype, and the fragility of trust. Invented headlines proliferated, each more damning than the last, serving as epitaphs for a fallen empire. Theranos, from unicorn to zero, the audacious fraud that rocked Silicon Valley, declared one prominent financial publication. While a medical journal soberly reported patient safety compromised, the devastating medical legacy of Theranos, tabloids ran sensationalist pieces. The billionaire betrayer, Elizabeth Holmes' house of cards crumbles, alongside more measured analysis in reputable newspapers. A reckoning for Silicon Valley's culture of hype. Theranos' verdict signals new era of scrutiny. The consistent narrative across the media landscape was one of profound disappointment and a collective sense of being misled, transforming Holmes from a celebrated innovator into a symbol of deceit. The social media landscape continued its relentless assault. Beyond the initial trending hashtags, satirical accounts dedicated to lampooning Theranos and Holmes gained massive followings, producing daily content that kept the scandal firmly in the public eye. Users shared their own personal anecdotes of encountering Theranos, detailing suspicious experiences or questioning the company's claims long before the truth emerged, adding to the communal sense of validation for the whistleblowers. Investigative journalism subreddits and forums dedicated to business ethics exploded with detailed discussions, poring over court documents and public statements, ensuring that no detail of the fraud went unexamined. The digital echo chamber, once a force for amplifying hype, now served as a powerful engine of public accountability, ensuring that the lessons of Theranos would not be forgotten. The speed and reach of online communication meant that the fallout was global and immediate, solidifying public opinion against Holmes with unprecedented efficiency. For the antagonist, Elizabeth Holmes, the aftermath was a descent into an abyss of legal battles, public condemnation, and the complete annihilation of her former life. Her once unshakable confidence visibly crumbled under the sustained pressure. Her carefully constructed persona, the deep voice and unwavering gaze, began to crack, revealing moments of vulnerability and even desperation in public appearances and court proceedings. She became the subject of documentaries, podcasts, and books, all dissecting her rise and spectacular fall, ensuring her story would be analyzed and reanalyzed for years to come. Her name, once whispered with reverence in tech circles, became a cautionary byword for fraud and corporate hubris, a permanent stain on the entrepreneurial landscape. The very allure that had captivated billionaires and world leaders transformed to a magnet for scorn and ridicule. Every past success, every glowing profile, every celebrated award was retroactively viewed through the lens of deception, stripping her of any perceived legitimacy. Her personal relationships fractured under the strain, and her carefully guarded private life became fodder for public consumption, all serving to underscore the totality of her professional and personal collapse. The antagonist's company met an equally ignominious end. Regulatory sanctions, lawsuits from former partners and investors, and an irreversible loss of public trust led to its inevitable demise. The company, once valued at billions, was liquidated, its assets sold off for pennies on the dollar. The state-of-the-art labs, once shrouded in secrecy, were emptied, their equipment either repurposed or rendered obsolete. The dream of accessible, revolutionary blood testing, which had drawn so many talented individuals to Theranos, died with it, leaving behind a trail of disillusioned employees and unfulfilled promises. The company's collapse was swift and absolute, serving as a stark monument to the dangers of building an enterprise on falsehoods. The physical remnants of Theranos, once symbols of groundbreaking innovation, became stark reminders of a colossal failure and a monumental fraud. Conversely, the triumph of the protagonist, the journalists, whistleblowers, and regulators, not merely symbolic, it led to tangible, far-reaching changes. The Theranos scandal spurred a critical revaluation within the venture capital industry. Investors became demonstrably more cautious, demanding greater transparency, more rigorous scientific validation, and a deeper understanding of the underlying technology before committing capital. The era of blindly investing in charismatic founders with disruptive ideas, regardless of scientific proof, began to recede. Due diligence practices were strengthened, and the importance of independent expert review became paramount. This shift in investment culture had a ripple effect, forcing startups across all sectors, but particularly in healthcare and biotech, to prioritize demonstrable results and ethical conduct over pure hype. The market itself began to punish those who prioritized speed and narrative over substance. The media learned a painful but crucial lesson. A newfound skepticism emerged towards tech unicorns and their often unverifiable claims. Major publications committed to more in-depth, investigative reporting on startups, refusing to take executive claims at face value. The emphasis shifted from profiling charismatic founders to scrutinizing their products, their financial health, and their ethical practices. This was a direct result of the Theranos scandal, which exposed the dangers of uncritical reporting and the need for rigorous journalistic standards in the face of powerful PR machines. The media became more attuned to the nuances of scientific validation and the red flags of corporate secrecy, leading to a more informed and balanced public discourse around technological innovation. This widespread fallout and the definitive victory for truth solidified the Theranos story as a modern parable. It was a narrative that resonated precisely because it touched upon themes of ambition, trust, and the alluring yet dangerous nature of unchecked power. The sheer scale of the deception, coupled with the high-profile individuals involved, guaranteed its place as a landmark case in corporate malfeasance. The comprehensive collapse of Elizabeth Holmes's career and the complete dissolution of Theranos stood as undeniable proof that even the most meticulously constructed lies, when confronted by relentless truth, will ultimately crumble. The triumph was not just about punishing wrongdoing, it was about reaffirming the fundamental principles of integrity and accountability that are essential for any functioning society, especially one built on the promises of scientific advancement and technological progress. The legacy of the Theranos, the affair was not just a historical footnote, but a living, breathing warning. The ripple effect of the Theranos implosion extended far beyond the immediate players, permeating the very ethos of Silicon Valley and altering the landscape of innovation. Regulatory bodies previously criticized for their reactive rather than proactive stance now implemented stricter oversight mechanisms for medical and health technology startups. The FDA, for instance, emphasized clearer guidelines for diagnostic devices and accelerated its review processes for novel technologies, ensuring that efficacy and safety were paramount from the outset, not an afterthought. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services also intensified its scrutiny of clinical laboratories, enforcing stricter quality control standards and conducting more frequent, unannounced inspections. These changes directly addressed the systemic vulnerabilities that Theranos had so expertly exploited, creating a more robust regulatory environment designed to prevent similar large-scale deceptions in the future. The legal ramifications of the Theranos saga also set powerful precedents. The successful prosecution of Elizabeth Holmes and her former coup, Sunny Balwani, sent a clear message that even in the high-stakes, high-risk world of tech startups, criminal fraud would be met with severe consequences. This was not merely a civil dispute. It was a criminal conviction that affirmed the gravity of their deception. This legal outcome served as a powerful deterrent, signaling that founders could no longer hide behind the veil of disruption to escape accountability. For fraudulent practices, the scale of the financial penalties and the prospect of lengthy prison sentences instilled a newfound sobriety in an industry often characterized by aggressive, boundary-pushing ambition. The courts had affirmed that intent to defraud, regardless of the ultimate outcome or initial lofty goals, would be punished. The public too emerged from the Theranos saga with a heightened sense of skepticism and discernment. The dazzling allure of the charismatic tech visionary, once embraced without question, was now viewed with a critical eye. Consumers became more savvy about health technology claims, demanding verifiable scientific backing before adopting new diagnostic tools or treatments. The collective experience of being misled by such a high-profile company fostered a healthier sense of caution, prompting individuals to question, research, and seek independent verification rather than simply accepting grand promises at face value. This cultural shift, while subtle, was profound, creating a more informed and empowered populace, less susceptible to unchecked hype, even within academic and scientific communities. The Theranos case became a mandatory case study. Business schools incorporated it into their ethics curricula, analyzing the psychological factors that allowed the fraud to flourish, the failures of corporate governance, and the critical importance of ethical leadership. Scientific and medical institutions used it to highlight the dangers of bypassing established peer review processes and the necessity of independent validation for all new technologies. It became a powerful teaching tool, demonstrating the catastrophic consequences when scientific integrity is sacrificed for commercial gain and emphasizing the societal responsibility of innovators. The story served as a harsh, real-world lesson in professional ethics and the perils of intellectual dishonesty. The very language used to describe Silicon Valley began to change. Terms like unicorn, once purely aspirational, were now often used with a note of caution, implicitly carrying the risk of being a Theranos in waiting. The narrative shifted from an almost utopian vision of endless innovation to a more grounded, realistic understanding of the challenges and potential pitfalls of technological progress. This was a maturing moment for the industry, a forced reckoning with its own shadows and excesses. The glory of rapid growth and world-changing ideas now had to be tempered with the essential requirements of transparency, accountability, and verifiable results. The public demanded it, the media exposed it, and the legal system enforced it. The total victory was therefore multifaceted: a legal triumph, a media vindication, a cultural awakening, and a systemic recalibration. It was a profound lesson learned, at immense cost, but one that ultimately strengthened the integrity of the innovation ecosystem. The collapse of Theranos became an enduring symbol, not just of a single company's failure, but of a broader societal pivot towards a more discerning, accountable, and ethically conscious future in the realm of technology and business. The echoes of Elizabeth Holmes's deception would resonate for generations, a permanent reminder of the critical importance of truth in a world increasingly built on promises and projections. Her fall cemented the triumph of those who fought tirelessly to expose the fraud, securing their place as champions of journalistic integrity, ethical courage, and the unwavering pursuit of justice. The total victory of truth was cemented not just by the legal and media outcomes, but by the enduring shift in public consciousness. The dramatic collapse of Theranos and the conviction of Elizabeth Holmes provided a profound sense of satisfaction for an audience. Weary of unchecked corporate power and deceptive narratives, it was a clear demonstration that even the most powerful and charismatic figures, operating within seemingly impenetrable circles of influence, could ultimately be held accountable when confronted with irrefutable evidence and tenacious oversight. This outcome resonated deeply with a public that often feels powerless against corporate giants, offering a powerful affirmation of justice served. The sense of vindication for the whistleblowers, journalists, and regulators was palpable for Tyler Schultz and Erica Chung, who risked their careers and reputations. The outcome was a profound validation of their courage. Their stories of enduring harassment and threats became crucial components of the larger narrative, highlighting the immense personal cost of speaking truth to power. Their unwavering commitment to ethics, despite the immense pressure, solidified their legacy as modern-day heroes who dared to challenge a seemingly invincible empire. Similarly, for John Carreyrou, whose relentless investigative work was initially met with fierce denial and legal threats, the final verdict was a complete and absolute triumph of journalistic integrity. His meticulous reporting served as a powerful reminder of the essential role of a free and uncompromised press in safeguarding public interest and holding powerful entities accountable. This victory was also a triumph for scientific integrity and the medical community. The rigorous standards of evidence-based medicine, often dismissed by Holmes as archaic or slow, were unequivocally upheld. The case underscored the critical importance of peer review, independent validation, and transparent data in any field, especially one that directly impacts human health. It was a powerful repudiation of the move fast and break things ethos when applied to life-and-death medical diagnostics. The medical establishment, initially wary, could now unequivocally state that the fundamental principles of scientific rigor had prevailed over technological hubris and corporate shortcuts. This reinforced trust in established medical practices and institutions, which had been undermined by Theranos' claims of revolutionary but unproven technology. The ultimate satisfaction for the audience came from witnessing the complete demolition of an illusion. For years, Theranos had been presented as a beacon of innovation, a testament to American ingenuity. Holmes herself was lauded as a visionary, a trailblazer who shattered glass ceilings. The public had invested emotionally and, sometimes financially, in this compelling narrative. To see it systematically unraveled, layer by layer, by the sheer force of truth, provided a cathartic experience. It was a reminder that authenticity, preparation, and ethical conduct ultimately supersede charisma, empty promises, and carefully constructed facades. The story offered a stark, clear moral, that facts, however inconvenient, will always emerge victorious over even the most sophisticated and well-funded lies. The legacy of the Theranos saga, therefore, is not just a chapter in Silicon Valley history, but a profound and enduring lesson. It stands as a monumental testament to the power of courage in the face of intimidation, the unwavering pursuit of truth against pervasive deception, and the ultimate triumph of justice. The total victory was not merely a legal judgment, it was a reaffirmation of fundamental values, a clear signal that the pursuit of innovation must always be tempered by integrity, and that even the most audacious deceptions will eventually be exposed in the harsh light of undeniable facts. The audience was left with a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that in this epic showdown, the truth had truly won. The epic saga of Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos is more than just a sensational true crime story or a cautionary tale of corporate fraud. It is a timeless, instructive parable for our modern age, a stark and unforgettable lesson etched into the very fabric of ambition, innovation, and integrity. At its core, this dramatic confrontation distills a universal truth, that in the long run, authenticity and meticulous preparation will always, without fail, triumph over even the most meticulously crafted deception and the most dazzling, yet hollow, charisma. This is the enduring moral of a story that captivated the world and continues to resonate deeply. The first, and perhaps most profound lesson gleaned from the ashes of Theranos is the indispensable value of authenticity. Elizabeth Holmes presented a carefully curated persona, from her adopted deep voice to her monochromatic wardrobe, designed to project an image of unshakable genius and visionary leadership. She spoke with a practiced conviction that could mesmerize even the most seasoned investors and political figures. Yet, beneath this polished exterior, there was a fundamental lack of genuine substance, a hollow core where verifiable scientific achievement should have been. Her entire operation was a performance, a prolonged act of fake-it-till-you-make-it taken to a criminally destructive extreme. The story serves as a powerful reminder that true leadership, lasting impact, and genuine success cannot be built on an edifice of pretense. Eventually, the mask will slip, the carefully constructed facade will crumble, and the true character or lack thereof will be laid bare for all the world to see. Authenticity, however unglamorous it may sometimes seem, is the bedrock of trust, and trust is the indispensable currency in any endeavor, especially one that impacts human lives. This inherent lack of authenticity in Holmes stands in stark contrast to the relentless preparation of those who ultimately exposed her. The investigative journalists, like John Carrero, did not rely on gut feelings or superficial impressions. They delved deep, painstakingly cross-referencing documents, interviewing countless sources, enduring legal threats and immense pressure, all in pursuit of verifiable facts. They had the receipts, emails, internal reports, testimonies, and hard data that systematically dismantled every one of Holmes's carefully constructed lies. Their work was arduous, often unglamorous, and demanding an unwavering commitment to truth, regardless of the narrative being pushed by powerful interests. Similarly, the whistleblowers, courageous individuals who risked everything to expose the fraud from within, armed themselves with detailed knowledge and undeniable proof of the company's deception. Their preparation wasn't just about gathering evidence, it was about fortifying their resolve against immense intimidation. This meticulous preparation, this dedication to objective reality, proved to be the unstoppable force that shattered the immovable object of Holmes's illusion. It underscores that true mastery and lasting impact come not from grand pronouncements, but from diligent, painstaking work and an unyielding commitment to verifiable results. The Theranos saga also serves as a critical warning against the intoxicating dangers of unchecked charisma and the seductive power of a compelling narrative when divorced from verifiable facts. In Silicon Valley, there's a powerful tendency to idolize visionaries and to prioritize disruptive stories over demonstrable substance. Elizabeth Holmes skillfully tapped into this cultural zeitgeist, presenting a narrative of medical innovation that resonated deeply with investors eager for the next big thing. Her personal story, the Stanford dropout, the young female CEO in a male-dominated industry, the mission to revolutionize healthcare, was undeniably compelling. This narrative, combined with her magnetic presence, allowed her to bypass the rigorous due diligence and scientific scrutiny that should have been mandatory for a company dealing with human health. The lesson here is profound. Charisma can be a powerful tool for inspiration, but it is a dangerous substitute for competence and truth. Audiences, investors, and partners must learn to look beyond the captivating story and demand concrete evidence, independent validation, and transparent practices. The fake it till you make it ethos, when applied to areas of critical public trust like healthcare, becomes not just risky, but morally and legally reprehensible. This leads directly to another crucial moral: the absolute necessity of skepticism and rigorous due diligence. Many of the high-profile figures who invested in or endorsed Theranos later claimed they were fooled by Holmes's charm and the company's secrecy. Yet, the red flags were often there for those willing to look past the hype. The lack of peer-reviewed data, the constant invoking of trade secrets to deflect questions, the rapid scaling without verifiable proof, these were all warning signs that, in hindsight, screamed of profound issues. The Theranos scandal serves as a stark reminder for investors, journalists, and the public alike that a healthy dose of skepticism is not cynicism, but a vital protection against grand deceptions. Due diligence is not merely a bureaucratic checkbox. It is a fundamental ethical responsibility, especially when billions of dollars and, more importantly, human lives are at stake. It means asking the hard questions, demanding empirical evidence, consulting independent experts, and refusing to be swayed by mere promises or persuasive performances. The story shouts from the rooftops that the burden of proof rests firmly on the one making the audacious claims, not on the skeptical observer. Ultimately, the downfall of Elizabeth Holmes and the complete collapse of Theranos is a testament to the enduring power of justice. It underscores the profound truth that lies, no matter how grandly conceived or meticulously maintained, are inherently unstable and will inevitably unravel under the relentless pressure of scrutiny. The system, though sometimes slow and imperfect, ultimately works to expose deceit and hold those accountable for their actions. It reminds us that truth is a powerful and persistent force, capable of piercing through the thickest fog of deception. The satisfaction felt by the audience witnessing this dramatic downfall stems from this deep-seated belief in justice, a reaffirmation that integrity and honesty are not just ideals, but practical necessities for sustainable success and a healthy society. This story will echo through generations, a constant reminder that the only true and lasting foundation for any endeavor, whether personal or professional, is unwavering truth. The Theranos story stands as an unwavering beacon, reminding us that true innovation is not merely about audacious ideas or captivating narratives, but about diligent scientific inquiry, transparent validation, and an unyielding commitment to ethical practice. It serves as a powerful testament to the fact that while a compelling vision can inspire, only verifiable truth can sustain. This saga, filled with ambition and deceit, ultimately highlights the enduring strength of accountability and the vital importance of distinguishing between genuine progress and mere performance. Its lessons are timeless, urging us to look beyond the surface, to question boldly, and to always prioritize integrity above all else. It is a story that will be told and retold, ensuring that the critical lessons of preparation, authenticity, and the triumph of justice remain firmly embedded in the collective memory, guiding future generations of innovators, investors, and the public alike towards a more discerning and ethically grounded path. Before you go, what are your thoughts on Elizabeth Holmes's rise and fall? Do you believe justice was fully served, or are there deeper systemic issues in Silicon Valley that still need to be addressed? Share your comments below. Hit that like button if you found this breakdown compelling. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the most explosive political showdowns and corporate sagas of our time. Your engagement helps us bring these vital stories to light. But if you thought that Theranos scandal was the only time billions vanished into thin air, you're in for another shock. If the fight for integrity in the tech world grabbed you, then prepare yourself for an even more staggering financial fraud that shook an entire nation. Next, step into the high-stakes world where financial titans clash and empires crumble and wires scarred, the fake billions. This is the unbelievable true story of Wirecard, once hailed as Germany's tech darling, and the staggering $1.9 billion that simply vanished. Witness the dramatic showdown between Marcus Brown, the charismatic, a CEO who defied all accusations, and the relentless investigative journalist who spent years unearthing the shocking truth. We drop you directly into the most explosive moments, revealing how an elaborate web of phantom revenues and non-existent partners allowed Wirecard to deceive investors, regulators, and an entire nation. Discover the irrefutable receipts, the internal documents, contradictory data, and past statements that systematically dismantled one of the biggest corporate frauds in modern history. This isn't just a story about money. It's an epic saga of hubris, betrayal, and the fight for integrity in the digital age. See the total victory of truth over a meticulously crafted illusion, the stunning aftermath of a corporate collapse that sent shockwaves across the globe, and the timeless lessons learned from Germany's most embarrassing financial scandal. Click the video on your screen right now to dive into the vanishing billions of